Hello, hello. Welcome to another installment of Cage's Comment. I am Alex Cage. The NBA draft at time of recording should have just about wrapped up. We will be focusing as I am checking my phone to see if it is actually completely done. We are still a few picks left in the second round, but we will be discussing the first round from last night, and of course the Giannis trade, and maybe the Luca piece, the Reeves piece, but the Luca observation, if the reporting is true, that I saw today. So that's what we're going to get into, and of course we will spend the reaction to the draft will be on the Spurs and their two first round picks, and my thoughts compared to what I thought they could or would do going into the draft from the day before. If you want to know that, I made a video before the draft about the options and the paths that I thought the Spurs had and where they could go. So, but we are going to start with the Giannis trade of it all, and we'll touch on kind of all sides a bit. Probably spending a little more on the Giannis actual or the Miami side of this. But if you've been living under a rock, Giannis was traded to the Miami Heat. The Heat get Giannis and Bobby Portis. The Bucks get Tyler Hero, Khalil Ware, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Caparis. I hope I'm saying that right, but the first round pick from Miami last season, the guard. Three future first round picks, including number 13 last night, who the Bucks used to pick Nate Ament out of Tennessee, and then a pick swap and a second rounder in the future. So I said I was going to start with the Heat. I'm actually going to start with the Bucks on this. The Bucks should have, a year ago, the moment Damian Lillard tore his Achilles, they should have had a pragmatic voice say, look, guys, we did everything we could, right? We gave away a bunch of first round picks to go get Drew Holiday so Giannis would sign the extension, and we won the title. We got old. We got unathletic. We, did not revamp the roster around Giannis quick enough, but we went ahead and we took out a second mortgage on the house to go get Damian Lillard. And that just didn't work. And now, Dame popped his Achilles. That's it. We can't do it. There's no path to us making a championship team around Giannis anymore. He's got 2 years left on this deal. We should try and trade him now to get maximum value. It'll be best for us. It'll be best for Giannis and wanting to compete late into the season past the first and second rounds. It'll be better for everybody, as tough as it will be to part with, the best player since Lou Alcindor, right? They didn't. They waited a year too late, as I think is pretty normal and honestly pretty human in situations like this. So that was a bad job by them. That being said, pretty good job. Once you, kind of account for the fact that they waited too long, pretty good job and a pretty good haul. So, I think I said this in the preview show as well, but between Boston and the Heat, I thought from a Giannis perspective, he should have tried to force his way to Boston and basically said, I won't sign an extension anywhere but Boston. But from the Bucks side, the Heat deal made, to me, way more sense. You got a couple of young guys in Caparis. I know I've got to be butchering that. And Khalil Ware, you get Hero, who is a good player, if not a great one, and he's on an expiring contract. He'll have value if you want to flip him. He'll also have value in just taking some attention away from Burries, who you drafted at 10, and Ament, who you drafted at 13, and keep you kind of functional in your starting five, right? So they've got Rollins and Caparis in the backcourt. They've got Hero and Burries, or at the point guard, I should say, and then Hero and Burries can play the two. Kuzma, Ament, Jaquez Jr. at your forward spots, and then Miles Turner and Khalil Ware. That's not a good roster, right? That's not like a playoff or a contending team or anything like that. But it is position wise. That's like a functional roster. You're not going to have to ask Brandon Burries or Ament to play kind of outside their roles or play outside their positions on this team the way like Cooper Flag had to play point guard because the Mavs just didn't have one, right? Kyrie hurt, they signed D'Angelo Russell, but they don't want to play him. Like it's like, hey, yeah, Coop, we know you're not really a point guard. We know you're a wing guy, but we need you to play it because we don't have anybody else, right? So they're not going to have to do that, and I think that's good for Burries. I think that's good for Ament. And so, look, they kicked a lot of these first rounds. So they got 13 in this draft, right? But then they kicked the other ones out to like 2030 and 2031 and I think 2032. I think 2031 is the swap. So that, excuse me, sorry. Yeah, that's great entertainment value right there. Me coughing my ass off. Uh, no, but that's so I think that roster kind of like makes sense positionally and will be functional to actually get a good what's the word I'm looking for here? To be able to see how Burries and Ament develop. There's a word there, and I've lost it, but that is a functional roster. I think they honestly ended up doing a really good job. I do think the fact that they don't own their own draft picks moving forward. Portland has some. I think the Pelicans might actually still have one, but they don't own them. That's a tough spot to be in because, like I said, it's not a good roster, right? Even if positionally it's balanced, but you don't necessarily want to trade Hero off because you don't want to be like absolutely garbage because you're just giving away that pick anyway. Even if I would probably look to flip Hero, particularly if it sounds like Detroit has some interest there. But overall, I think Bucks waited way too long. Should have pulled the cord on this or last year, but for waiting as long as they did, once they ended up in this situation, they honestly made out well. And I think Giannis probably made a mistake. It certainly feels like a more direct path to contention in Boston than it does with the Heat. So, on the Giannis and the Heat side of this, look, you had to do it, and you got Giannis. So you feel certainly a lot better than you were in terms of are you going to be a playing team? I would expect not. They should be able to feast on the bottom half of the Eastern Conference. But I don't know that I think they're better than Detroit or Boston. And I shouldn't say I don't know. I don't think, as presently constituted, they are better than Detroit or Boston or the Knicks, which puts your ceiling at 4 if the Pacers aren't all the way back with Halliburton. And if not, probably puts your ceiling as the 5th team in the East. And that's not a great spot to be in, given that if you're Giannis and you had Dame, you were the 5th seed in the East, right? So it feels like it's, instead of Giannis and Dame, it's Giannis and Bam and nothing else really. So they are in desperate need of perimeter shooting and playmaking. They obviously will, I would imagine, will try and keep Norman Powell, who was an all-star last year, although he is, I think, 31, 32. Can they convince guys to take the minimum in free agency? Could they get Andrew Wiggins to opt out of his player option and sign a longer deal for more money but less per year so they can go out and maybe have access to the mid-level exception? We'll see. But they are in desperate need of shooting and playmaking on the perimeter. That being said, man, that defense is going to be disgusting, right? Davion Mitchell at point of attack with Bam now as like a hybrid wing paint defender, and Bam can do both at an extremely high level with Giannis running around the back line of that defense. It's gonna be disgusting. I imagine they're gonna play a lot of games that go into the fourth quarter, you know, 75 to 80. Like these are gonna be games that end in that struggle to get to 200 points collectively between the two teams, right? I would imagine you should take a lot of unders, a lot of unders. If you were a fan of 90s and early 2000s, low scoring, slow, like I I imagine the Heat are going to be top of your list to watch next year because those games I think are going to be slugfest offensively, and that the Heat are just going to be, I think, you know, probably OKC, obviously, the Spurs with Wemby, obviously, Detroit out east, and then Miami. They're probably going to be a top 4 or 5 defense in the league between those three players and Eric Spoelstra, uh, coaching. I think Miami's defense is going to be awesome. I can't see a world where Bam and Giannis don't get in each other's way on offense. That seems like far too 15 feet and in from your two best players. So Bam is, excuse me again, sorry. Bam is a better player, I think, than Tyler Hero. I also think Hero and Giannis make a lot more sense and are a better complement to each other than Bam and Giannis. But you keep Bam, you'll go from here. And look, I'm saying all of this, and maybe it's a little disrespectful in the sense that Pat Riley's one of the best team builders in league history. Eric Spoelstra's a great coach, and the Heat have a history of finding, developing, and getting the most out of, hidden gems, right? So, is there a world where they figure it out defensively, or excuse me, on offense, and that they're able to get enough guys on minimum deals and in free agency to come take 1 year flyers and ball out in this system? It could happen. I could see it, but that's a lot of work to do. So, okay, I'm gonna pause this real quick because I keep coughing. I'll be right back. Oh, okay, and I'm back after hopefully clearing all that out, and I'll stop coughing into the mic for you guys here. But ended with the Heat. A lot of work to do, but it is Pat Riley. It is Eric Spoelstra. Maybe I think the general sentiment seems to be what I'm saying, which is a little down on the idea that they're actually contenders. And maybe the team that got there with, as an 8 seed with Jimmy Butler, we should have a little more respect for what Riley and Eric Spoelstra can do and the Heat culture that exists there. The third side of this is Boston. And Boston is an interesting spot in this because initially, I will say, when I saw that apparently Boston's offer was Jaylen Brown and a couple of first round picks, and that's pretty much it. And the Bucks had interest in Hugo Gonzalez and Baylor Shireman, and the Celtics were like, nope, can't give up those two guys for Giannis. My initial reaction was, that's insane. That's patently absurd. And that can't possibly be like the line you drew, right? So you would have still had Derek White, Tatum, Pritchard. You obviously would have had Giannis, Sam Hauser, and then Kedar Garza as your backup big. And then you're filling around the edges again the same way you did last year, and you are apparently really good at that. And that was my initial reaction. And as far as the Gonzalez Shireman piece of it, I still think that. All that being said, as I sit here, and as I just said about the Heat, I still think Boston's better. I still think Boston's better, despite the fact that they didn't get Giannis. I am also just personally, there's a lot about Jaylen Brown. How does Jaylen Brown feel? How about this? How Jaylen Brown's been almost traded, I swear, half a dozen times. I swear they were going to trade him for Kawhi. They were going to trade him for Anthony Davis. They were going to trade him for Kevin Durant. Right? Like, Jaylen Brown has, I swear, almost been traded almost every year of his career, seemingly. I don't think, and yet he comes back and he's still Jaylen Brown for them. I actually don't think it's that big a deal. If there is anyone who has proven I can be in trade rumors and then still end up playing at a high level, it's Jaylen Brown. Now, I think the stuff that he's done this offseason, as far as that stream where he said it was his favorite year, not the year that he won Finals MVP and Eastern Conference Finals MVP and won the title, but I think all that's weird. I think it is, but I don't think it really matters. I think he's still, if they don't trade him, he's still going to end up being Jaylen Brown and just fine. And I also don't actually think they're going to end up trading him. So I just mentioned all the times that he's almost been traded. Kawhi, Anthony Davis, in his prime Kevin Durant, and now Giannis. I was in his prime Anthony Davis too, right? Like, they have never tried to trade him for anything less than a top tier in their prime superstar. If they can't trade him for Giannis, and they obviously can't now, I don't think they're going to trade Jaylen Brown. I don't think there's a offer out there that will entice them to give up a guy who was an All-NBA player this year, who got on ballots for MVP because he was the best player on this team that we all thought, or the general consensus was going to take a big step back this year in the regular season, and they ended up not really. So I think Jaylen Brown ends up staying in Boston. I don't think it's that big deal. That is going to be that big of a deal that it's going to derail. They have almost traded him at least 4 times. I don't think it's that big a deal. I do think it's a bit weird. I don't really have in my head any other player of his caliber that has been in trade rumors this much with the team that drafted him. But he has, and he's always played through it. So I don't think it's that big a deal, actually. I don't think he's overly irritated about it, at least any more than he was the last time they did it. And I think he's going to come back next year and he's going to play like Jaylen Brown. So I still think Boston is good. I think the Shireman Gonzalez thing is just overvaluing their own young players. And young's also a relative term. The Hugo Gonzalez one, I understand in the extent that he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was 19. He's a teenager to start this season, I believe. As I'm pulling up their roster just to double check me. Yeah, he was 19. So I get if you want to hold on necessarily to him. Baylor Shireman's a 25-year-old in his second season. There's not really a ton of upside historically in that. So I would have done that if that was really all that they needed to add, because you still would have been left with basically your top 7 or 8 players, and you've shown that you can go find guys on the edges. I think that's a real overvalue, but Boston ultimately is going to be fine, and I don't think the Jaylen Brown piece of this is something that Boston really needs to worry about. They've done this before. Now, maybe this is the time that breaks the straw that breaks the camel's back, but I have a hard time believing that, if I'm being honest. I think Jaylen Brown's going to do what Jaylen Brown has done every other single time, which is go back onto the floor and play good basketball. So let's get to my Spurs. That's the Giannis side of it. That's all of the Giannis side. All of the Giannis side, or all of the sides of the Giannis deal. The Spurs. Jaden Quintance and Terrace Reed Jr. So in my pre-draft video, I said you don't usually find day one, or year one, I should say, contributors at 20. And they didn't, because they picked a guy with a knee injury who's going to have another surgery or procedure on the knee. And then they also picked Terrace Reed, and I actually have kind of a funny story about that I'll get to. But that being said, if you weren't going to trade up or couldn't trade up to give up a future first or something like that to go get Yak, so I didn't really think there was another realistic player of slotting into the spot that they needed at the 4 to help them this season. So I am okay with the Quintance and kind of okay with the Terrace Reed. I would have preferred Sinak because I don't think Quintance or Reed have the offensive game that can be played alongside Wemby. They don't really have the upside there because they don't have a perimeter game. They're paint guys, right? Reed, they're big-bodied, bullied, tough guys, and that is, I think, going to be great for the second unit. Going to be great in a year when Cornette's contract is partially guaranteed, or the year after when Cornette's contract is up, and they need a replacement to give them good minutes when Wemby is on the bench at the center spot, where the defense doesn't fall apart and they're still able to get some rim running. I'm not, the Quintance one, he's 19, so he's got a lot of kind of age and room to grow. Might have been a lottery pick, if not for, or might have been a lottery pick last year, if not for the injury. Comes back, tries to play, can't really do it in 4 games. I think, 6'9", long arms, good vert, pre-knee injury. It strikes me as kind of a Robert Williams comp, and that's who he can be, and that's a really useful player to have. Again, the upside there I think is limited for the Spurs because you're not going to play a Robert Williams type center next to Wemby, really, right? You you prefer to have the stretch four, that way Wemby can attack the rim and control the paint, as opposed to having to kind of relegate him, so to speak, to just the perimeter. But one of the options was, looking towards the future and getting guys that can replace a role, and that's one of them. So I'm happy with that. I do think particularly if you knew you were going to jump back into the first, I would have maybe preferred taking like a Cameron Carr, where, at some point or another, you're also going to have to replace the Vassell, Champagny, wing guard shooters around Castle and Fox, or Castle and Harper, excuse me, because again, unless a big jump in development, which I hope for Harper, but those guys, perimeter shooting is not their strongest attribute. That's probably how you want to complement those guys in the backcourt, and then obviously the spacing for Wemby. So they didn't do that, but I don't think that's a big deal for this year. I think these are, probably good picks. Funny story on Terrace Reed. I've got a friend whose family owns a condo out in Park City, Utah. And 2 years ago, me and him and my wife, his girlfriend, and another couple went out there the weekend of Sweet 16, and we did some skiing, some snowboarding, and we watched college basketball, and everybody hung out, and it was a fun time. And me and him were like, oh, this was really the perfect weekend to come out here and ski and snowboard and watch college basketball. We should do this again with all the boys, with all the guys next year. And so that's what we did this past March. We went out there Sweet 16 weekend. 9 of us guys in this condo. Me and him went snowboarding, skiing. I snowboard. He skied. It's in Park City. Park City, if you've never been, is a cool town to go to. You'll see a ton of like bachelorette parties and stuff. It's got a great main street with bars, shopping, the whole 9 yards, restaurants, everything. It was a good time. But we were watching UConn, and I may or may not have made the comment that I didn't think Terrace Reed, the 4-year senior who just played bully ball, really had pro upside. And one of my friends was telling me the whole time, you're wrong, he's a pro. It became a bit of a joke to be like, hey, he's a pro. I was like, he's not a pro. And sure enough, draft night, the group chat was like, hey, DC. And they call me DC because of DC Comics, because I'm a big, if you can't see, I'm a big superhero movie animated show guy. And so they said, hey, DC, are you going to apologize to this guy's BA, Brandon? Are you going to apologize to him when Terrace Reed gets drafted? And I was like, first off, I apologized about the Terrace Reed comment when UConn came back against Duke and made me and that whole group a bunch of money because we all bet the game in a variety of ways. Terrace Reed and UConn in that comeback won me the survivor pool, won me the bet on that game, and won me the future of them getting to the Final Four. So big, big Terrace Reed and Mullins fan after that weekend for that specifically, but I wasn't real high on the upside. And then lo and behold, you can't believe my shock when I am scrolling through Twitter at the end of this draft and it says the Spurs have traded for the 26th pick, and then I look up on the television, sitting in that chair right behind me, and they draft Terrace Reed Jr. What a what a full circle moment for me. So I guess he is a pro. I guess I'm rooting for him. I sure as hell hope I was wrong. Uh, but I think it's fine for the Spurs. I would have probably preferred Sinak, but because I think he has at least a shot at the upside of playing the stretch four. He did pull out to 3 point line a bit this year. Again, his the metrics for that, I think 66 from the line, 33 from three. It's not great, but it showed a little bit of upside as opposed to there's I no chance that Quaintance or Reed are able to, pull their game out to the 3 point line and provide any kind of spacing for the Spurs if they want to play them with Wimby. So that's the only kind of downside is I don't think that there's a ton of upside to these two picks besides just being good backup centers for the Spurs, which is something that they, need and will need, for during the Wimby era. But ultimately, I don't think there's a ton there that's going to. I just realized how drastically that changes the lighting between the notes and the draft ball R page. That's crazy. But not a ton of upside, but a fun story with the Terrace Reed bit for me. And he's a pro, so we'll see. And good Cornet replacements. So ultimately, not a terribly exciting draft, and I don't imagine that we'll see a ton of Quaintance and Reed this year, but we'll see. And I think they can be good Cornet replacements. So, see, I'm at the 30-minute mark. Do I want to keep going? Yeah. There's one more little comment here, I guess. So the Lakers paid Austin Reeves 4 years, 185 million. That comes out to about 46 million a year. I think the max they could have offered him was 5 for 240, which would have come out to like 48 million a year. So they save a couple million a year. I'm not quite sure who they would have ended up having to bet against. I think Austin Reeves would have had a market, but there are so few teams with the cap space to have offered him that kind of money that it feels like the Lakers probably could have gotten less. But in Austin Reeves' corner, you had Luka. And Luka really wanted Reeves to stay, really likes Reeves. He's really good friends with him. And apparently he made that clear to the Lakers whilst also to the point of, I should say, saying that if they had any Giannis trades to keep Reeves out of it. That is insane. That is positively insane as a rule that you would, keep Reeves in the event. Now, to be fair to Luka, I have not actually seen any reporting that they were ever actually in on the Giannis stuff, but that's a crazy. I think that's a crazy thing to have abided by if they were. And it made me think that the biggest team building advantage in sports may be a general manager that has the standing in the organization and the cojones to just tell superstars no or that they're wrong, or a superstar who just doesn't want any part of team building. Because between Giannis being seemingly perfectly okay with either Miami or Boston, when I think it's very clear that Boston would have been a far better situation to go to win a title. And Luka saying, "No, I wouldn't want Giannis if it meant giving up Austin Reeves." These guys just they're not they're not good. They're not good at this. Kawhi told the Clippers, "You have to trade everything to go get Paul George, otherwise I won't sign with you." Kevin Durant told the Nets to fire a coach he hadn't played for yet to go get Kyrie. Then he told them to hire Steve Nash, and then he wanted them to fire Steve. Like, we have given LeBron a lot of crap over the years about being like a shadow GM. And I think, on kind of a side note, that we've overestimated how much influence he's actually had outside of the second time in Cleveland. The rest of the time, Pat Riley told him no. Right? He wanted Pat Riley to fire Spoelstra and come down and coach again. And Riley was like, "Nope, stick with Spoelstra. That was the right move." And then obviously in LA, I think there's been a lot of give and take, to be honest with you. He wanted Ty Lue. The Lakers very clearly didn't. He did want Westbrook. He also wanted AD. Like, those moves have worked. I think there's been more of a mixed bag there. But by and large, Jesus, man, they're not good at this. And your GM has got to have the cojones to be like, "No, that's a bad idea," and find a way to, even if it means you gotta frame it differently, or kind of walk, or try not to just call it a dumb idea. These guys are bad at this ultimately. And that when I read that story or saw that, I thought that was crazy. I do think the Reeves uh, contract is, it's probably just too much. He's a good player, but is he $45 million good? Probably not. I think there's a real chance that by the end of the year, Lakers fans feel about that contract the way that Spurs fans feel about Fox, which is, yeah, maybe you had to do it because you made the trade for Fox, so you feel like you had to extend them, and you can't lose Austin Reeves for nothing, I guess. But man, that contract, I think, is gonna look underwater by the end of the first playoff run. I just do. And they're in a tough spot because not only did Luka, obviously really want Reeves to do that, he also apparently wants them to go get an A-list center, and I don't know how that's really going to work if you don't have, the cap space. So they'll probably, I would imagine, delay the actual signing of that deal for Reeves so they can keep his cap hold at like 16 million without his new, number hitting the books yet, so they can have more money in free agency. But I think they're in a tough spot. I know Kessler is, they're gonna have to, like, the A-list center is like Kessler. Like, they're gonna have to play the restricted, or Jalen Duren. Like, they're gonna have to play the restricted free agent game, and that's ultimately probably only gonna really end up being good for Kessler and Duren to get the money they want from the team that they're already on. So we'll see. But I saw that story and I just thought it was kind of crazy, and it just made me think of all the instances of these, like, shadow GMs, these star players, and like, they're not a great track record here of these guys actually having a good understanding of how to build the team around them correctly. With that said, as I mentioned LeBron earlier, kind of makes the 8 straight finals a little less impressive. I'm not sure, but like, that's the best result of any of these quote unquote, shadow GM, best player with their hand on the roster construction out of any of these guys, certainly in modern times, is the 8 straight finals with the 3-1 comeback and the 2 championships in in Miami. So I think that's it for today. I forgot to say it at the beginning, so if you stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. But like, rate, subscribe, give me a comment, tell me where I'm wrong, tell me where I'm right. I guess you'll probably never tell me when I'm right. It would have to happen first. But nonetheless, thank you guys for listening. Talk to you next time.